Hello, and welcome to the All Things Narrative podcast, where we explore the relationships between the stories we love and the stories we live. I'm your host, Derrick Hatch, and let's get started. Welcome, wizards and muggles out there, to the world of all things narrative, and to this month's edition of Why We Love. We are back. It is September, and we've got another exciting franchise to talk about today. Franchise is a weird word. I don't even like that we call them franchises, because these are essentially great stories, right? Great stories of literature and film and stories that shape us as people and culture. So, we should really ditch that word franchise. It sounds so corporate, right? So, welcome to the All Things Narrative podcast. If this is your first time joining us, I just want to take a second and say welcome, welcome, welcome. And before we dive into this topic, just wanted to let you know that All Things Narrative doesn't just do podcasts. We also do workshops and one-on-one coaching. What do we tend to focus on? We focus on all things narrative. So the art of storytelling, narrative therapy practices, how to merge these worlds together. And so we really are interested in understanding how stories influence us, how they shape who we are, and how they inspire us to keep going even in the most difficult of times. And so what we're going to talk about today is a wonderful series that I feel like whenever I do a workshop, this comes up at some point, either, if it's a one-off workshop or a 6-week workshop, because it's such a great story that resonates with so many people, and it's a great connecting point as well. I wanted to take a second and read a review that somebody wrote about that workshop. The Live a Meaningful Story workshop. They wrote on Google that I really enjoyed each session of this workshop to the fullest. Derrick asked the right questions to help you see your story as a collective of experience that shape you into who you are today, and he helps you to have hope for the future. Especially as a young adult, I found this helpful in knowing how to view the past while looking ahead with meaning. And so, that's what we're going for right there. And so if you want to learn more about what we do at All Things Narrative, please visit allthingsnarrative.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and all the social media, all that jazz. And of course, subscribe to the podcast here so that way you never miss an episode. Now, for these Why We Loves, I'm not alone. I've actually got some very, very special people in my life here today. So the first one sitting right next to me for the first time on the All Things Narrative podcast is my wonderful, beautiful, amazing wife, Tori.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tori.
And joining me and Tori is someone very special to us as well. One of my best friends in the whole world. He was a groomsman at my wedding. He has been in my life for way more than half my life, and all the way from Southern California. I want to introduce to you Mr. Braeden Storkersen. Welcome.
Oh, I'm so stoked to be here. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, For these Why We Loves, they're series that I tend to know a lot about previously, but this one I'm really excited to have you both on because you both know way more than I do about Harry Potter. And so I'm excited to learn from you guys. And, I never read the book, so that's kind of my first confession.
Oh,
here.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You've watched all of the Harry Potter movies?
Yes. So I basically am going off the movies. So I'm going to come at it at that perspective. And then you guys, who have read the books and seen the movies, I'm very curious to get your perspective on this as well. So
now I know some people don't like the newer movies, but have you seen the Fantastic Beasts movies as well?
Both of us have only seen the first Fantastic Beasts movie, and we weren't
Okay.
So we weren't super impressed with it enough to keep going. But what about you?
Yeah, I've seen all of them, and honestly, they are not that great. The first one I enjoyed, but it wasn't mind-blowing. And then the second and third one have been rough, to say the least. The third one, Kelsey, for those of us, that's my wife, we were watching it, and we were so confused the entire movie.
Really?
Like it did not make sense why the plot was progressing as it was until the very end. It was, I don't know what they were doing over there when they were writing that movie, to say the least.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. I'm a completionist. I'm committed to finishing it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, yeah, for this discussion, we're going to really focus in on the main 7 books.
Yes.
And 8 movies. So sorry, Fantastic Beasts fan, and if you're a fan of The Cursed Child, we're not going to hit on those. So we're going to strictly just talk about the main books and films. So Are we ready to jump into this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Here we go. Why we love Harry Potter. Start these off with a quote-unquote brief history of Harry Potter, and I'll keep it brief because I don't know a ton, but you guys can maybe fill in if there's any details that I miss in this intro here. So in 1990, an aspiring young writer named J.K. Rowling was sitting on a train to London. Sounds great, right? For those of you who don't know, London is like me and Tori's favorite place. Have you been there before, Braeden?
I have never been to London.
We should all go sometime.
Never really been to much of Europe at all, to be honest.
Oh yeah, we should do that. We should do that together. I think we'd have a blast.
Oh my gosh, I still want to go to Europe.
They actually have a Harry Potter, because they have the Harry Potter experience. They have part of it in the Warner Brothers Museum. I don't know if you've done that before out in Burbank.
I haven't actually.
It's really cool because they have the museum there. So they had a lot of movie props there. I remember when I went, they had the original Sorting Hat, which was really cool, and I got to be sorted by it.
Oh, that's awesome. Which house?
Gryffindor.
Oh, nice. How about you, Tori?
Oh, she didn't do it. She still hasn't been.
Oh, got it.
But
we can talk about houses later. Sorry, I'm distracted.
No, this is good. But yeah, in Europe they have the big Harry Potter tour. It's like the big thing where you get to go. But we did go to, when we went to Oxford, the Great Hall is Oxford's dining hall.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I knew a lot of it's in Edinburgh, I believe, right? In Scotland.
I think
it's not actually in... Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah. So it's, the Great Hall was in Oxford, and we were kind of surprised too when we were there and we heard that. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I keep getting off track of this brief history here. So her train got delayed. And while she was delayed, she started to scribble down kind of the initial ideas for what would become Harry Potter. The characters, the world building, all that stuff. And it's actually interesting because what I read this week was that I think she came up with the ending right then and there.
Yeah, she master planned the whole series. I mean, there's so many references to later elements of the plot, even within the first book.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, no, she definitely knew what she was doing, and she knew what story she wanted to tell and how she wanted to get there. The crazy part of this story, and this is like a common theme with everyone we've talked about, like all these great creators, with Stan Lee at Marvel and Walt Disney and George Lucas. There's this running theme, and J.K. Rowling fits right into this as well. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers, which is insane to me.
There's so much resilience to keep going.
Yeah. But in England, a company called Bloomsbury, very British name, and the American version of that, which is Scholastic, they were the companies that finally agreed to publish it. It's funny because I didn't know this either, that they wanted her pen name to sound more gender neutral. So that's actually where the idea of, her pen name being J.K. Rowling came from, was they said we wanted a pen name that could appeal more to male readers. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, if you're in England, or the Sorcerer's Stone, if you're in America, was published in 1997. So I was 5. How old were you, Tori? 4? And how old were you, Braeden, in 97?
Yeah, I was 3 years old at the time.
Okay, so 3 years old in 97. And so we know that she went on to write 6 other books that we'll all talk about today. And these books have sold more than 500 million copies. That's 500 million books and made around $7.7 billion. And Deathly Hallows, in fact, I don't know if it still holds this title or not, but it's because it was the fastest selling book in history, selling 11 million copies in 24 hours. And there were whole like FedEx trucks that had to be dedicated just to carrying that book out. And so, of course, we know that Harry Potter's gone on to spur, successful films, games, the Broadway play, and even a successful theme park, which Braeden, you and I had the pleasure of taking you there in Orlando.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Getting butterbeer and just exploring the whole park.
Yes.
Oh man, that was amazing. Actually taking the Hogwarts Express between the 2 parks because they split it between 2. It's not just one section.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll never forget that.
It's incredible. Now, Braeden, next time you come out here, they put a new ride in there. Have you heard about this ride?
Oh, did they?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
It is probably my favorite roller coaster I've ever been on in my life.
Whoa, that's setting the bar high.
Braeden,
what is it?
This ride is nuts. Here, I don't want to. I'm not going to spoil the ride because it's good if you know nothing going in. But yeah, Tori's going to say something on it too.
Yeah, it's my favorite roller coaster ever. Like, it was just... Which is so weird because you think of, like, how cool could a roller coaster be? But it was right. So cool. So, excellent roller coaster.
Wow. What's the name of it?
Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure.
Okay, yes, I have heard of this.
We waited 2.5 hours for it.
Totally worth it.
Oh, my goodness.
It was worth every moment. And when we got there, it was still like light outside. And then when we got on the ride, it was dark out.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's how you know it's a good ride when it's that long of a wait.
It is. Yeah. I will wait in that line for that too. Like again, because that is easily, that's the best ride ever. So we have to go when you come to visit. I know you want to do Disney World and all that, but when you come to visit, we have to do that.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's worth it.
We're getting robes. We're going to get wands. We're going all out with it.
Oh man, it's good. So that's all I got for the brief history. What I'd love to hear from each and every one of us now is what were your personal introductions to Harry Potter? So how did you first get into it? Braeden, you want to go first?
Yes, I was in first grade. I was at Christopher O'Neill's house for an overnighter.
I remember him.
I don't know where he's at now. I have not heard from him in years. I've tried to find him on social media. But anyway, so I was at his house for an overnighter. It was not a sleepover because we did not remotely sleep.
Yeah.
But at one point when he kind of like, I think he like went to like shower or something, and I just kind of went through his bookshelf and there was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I read like part of a chapter and I was hooked right away. And so then when I went home, I told my mom about it, and it turns out my brothers had already gotten the head start on me.
Oh wow!
And they'd already been reading it, and so that's when I jumped on into the mix. And of course, I grew up in a Christian household, so there was this reality of kind of some opposition to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
My grandma in particular was very sketchy about us reading it, and so we actually read it several years after it came out because of that. Because my mom had to like read it first to make sure it was cool, and then we read it.
That's kind of amazing. In first grade, you were able to read. Like, that's kind of blowing my mind how good your literary skills were in first grade.
Oh, really? Well, it was a hard read for me, but yeah, I was still into it.
Nice. Very cool. Well, it's kind of funny. So my great grandmother bought me the book. And she was telling me that she was having, I don't remember exactly how the story went, but it was something that one of her friends in like the little assisted living said, "Oh, this is really cool. You should get this for your great grandkids. My grandkids love it." And so she bought the book off of a recommendation of another elderly woman who said, "The kids like this. You should get this for them." So we got it. And at first, when I first saw it, I was kind of like, oh, this is that thing that everybody's into. It's probably lame. So I literally put it on the shelf and I didn't pick it up for a couple of years because everybody was so into it. And I was like, it can't be that cool. Like, come on, people. You know, I was totally like thinking.
Great grandma likes it.
Yeah, and my great grandma gave it to me. So, I mean, I loved her to death. I really did. So, but anyways, like I didn't think it was going to be that cool. And then I think it was like a summer. I was still I think I was like in 5th grade at that point, where there was literally nothing to do in the summer. And it was Southern California. So it's like 100 plus degrees and you're just sitting there going, oh, I hate everything. And so I saw it sitting on the bookshelf and I was like, you know what? I'll just flip through it because I'm bored. And I think I read the whole thing that summer. And my dad read it too. And so he read the whole thing. I read the whole thing. And then me and him were just hooked. And like every time the new book, like, because at that point, I think there was already at least 2 or 3 of them. So like we read that one and then we read the next one. And then we were the people waiting for the next one and got it like, you know, when it said like the fastest book selling, like we were one of those people who wanted to get it like ASAP. I think we bought it at Stater Brothers, the grocery store. You would wait and like people were lined up to get it because like all the grocery stores had it. Like every single possible place that sold anything were selling the books. And so we got it that way. And so yeah, I read all the books, but the movies, I don't even remember the first time I actually watched the movie, which is kind of funny. Like that's not as imprinted on my brain as the books and reading the books as if they were like nothing. Like I remember I finished, I think it was The Goblet of Fire, which is like one of the longest books. It's like so long. And I think I read it in 4 days, like literally just. It was always over the summer because there's nothing to do, you know? And so just keep reading until we would read the whole thing. So, yeah, it's fun.
So it's funny because my introduction is almost like a combination of your guys's. So like you, Tori, I too for a while was like, everybody likes this. It must be lame. You know, you want to be like unique and cool and yeah. And
all
like
hipster.
Even at like 2nd grade. And it's interesting, Braeden, because like you, I also got invited to a Harry Potter sleepover where now this sleepover was nuts because I don't remember a lot of sleepovers to this day, but I remember this one. We were given robes. There were
a
wands.
Witchcraft sleepover.
Literally, like all the food and drinks was stuff from the books, and we were sorted into amazing. Houses when we arrived.
Oh my god!
Why didn't I get invited to this sleepover?
Yeah, this sleepover was nuts, and I knew nothing was going on. Like I got sorted into Gryffindor, and everybody was like, "Yeah, that's awesome! You got Gryffindor," and I was like, "What's a Gryffindor?" Yeah,
you just got thrown right in.
I got thrown right into it. Yeah. And I just remember like the birthday boy, he like got Gryffindor and he's like, but I want to be in Slytherin. And I was like, what's a Slytherin? I don't know. And I said, Hufflepuff. That sounds weird, you know? And yeah, I didn't know anything. I just knew it was Harry Potter. And I just knew that it was things I didn't know about. But I think 3rd grade is when I saw the first movie. And I did not see it in theaters. I'm pretty sure we saw it after it had come out already on DVD. And maybe I saw it in theaters. I don't know. But I loved the movie. I loved the movie so much that I asked for Harry Potter Legos that Christmas. And I got the Hogwarts Express Lego. I got Snape's potion room. I got the place in the Fluffy is guarding and goes down to Professor
on
Quirrell.
The third floor.
I had the Professor Quirrell where it's like it was his face on one side of the Lego, and then you twisted it, and on the other side was Voldemort.
Yeah.
I had every Lego set from the first Harry Potter except the Hogwarts castle.
Wow. Yeah, the Hogwarts castle was massive. That was a huge project.
Well, and like the year before, I got, like the Knights castle, like the medieval like Knights Lego castle. That was like a set.
Oh, yeah.
So I had gotten that the year before. My parents said, you don't need another castle. So, but we had all
you were neglected.
Hey, you could get the Hogwarts castle now. I saw it the other day in a store, so you could still get it. But yeah, so yeah, and then I remember I was into like it long enough to where I got into Chamber of Secrets. I watched that movie. I went through this phase for about 3 years, like end of 5th grade to about end of 8th grade, where like music took over my life. And music took over my life so much that I did not keep up with anything besides music. Literally,
music was all that there was.
I didn't even see Spider-Man 2 when it came out.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's how much music had taken over my life.
Derrick didn't see a Spider-Man movie.
It's the only Spider-Man movie I never saw in theaters. I saw it like a year later, and it was like weird because I was like, why am I not keeping up with anything? But it was like, 3 years.
Is that one of your biggest life regrets?
Over. No, it's okay. But yeah, so I didn't keep up with Harry Potter, and I actually did not watch any of the other Harry Potter movies until I met Tori.
Wow.
I know. We straightened it out. So now that we got our intros out of the way, let's dive into the meat of the conversation, which is, of course, talking about the stories themselves. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through book by book or movie by movie, if you will. So, and maybe try to spend maybe about like 5 minutes on each at the most, and just kind of sharing like, what is that story? What is it about? What does it kind of resonate with you? Maybe your highlights, all that kind of stuff. Then after we share and talk about all these individually, we'll do our rankings. Get ready for that, Braeden.
That's going to be tough. That's like asking a parent to say which ones are their favorite children. Like rate, give your child tier list. Like that's
yeah.
You can't do it, But
it's all right. We're going to try. All right. So let's start with the Sorcerer's Stone, or the Philosopher's Stone for our European friends. So what I did, and you can check these out on my Letterboxd if you're interested. I'll have a link down in the show notes. But what I did for each of these movies is I tried to, as we went back and watched them all, or rewatched them all, I really wanted to get at like, what is the central like theme that this story is telling? This chapter of the story is telling. And thankfully, like Dumbledore is like a theme machine. I don't know what to even call it. But like Dumbledore, if you listen, he pretty much always tells you what the movie is about. There's always like one line that you're like, oh, that's what this is about. But for me, I'll start the conversation off with this. I think the Sorcerer's Stone is a classic good versus evil, like good triumphs over evil kind of story. It's very much introducing these concepts of the characters and the world building, and really trying to establish, like, the first thing that we know about Harry Potter, is that this is the boy who lived, and that the love of his mother and his father was able to, even though it ended their lives, they were able to save the lives. Their love, I think Dumbledore has a line in the movie about that, like the power of love. They saved his life from Voldemort. And it's even at the end of the movie. Oh, by the way, spoilers abound in this podcast. When Harry defeats Voldemort, the first time when he touches him, it's like this purity of love and good that, destroys that which is corrupt and evil. So, yeah. So what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on Sorcerer's Stone? The book, movie, all that stuff.
It's certainly the most nostalgic of all of them for me, just because that was like the original one that I got introduced to.
Same.
I can say in terms of themes, I wouldn't even say necessarily there's themes of each book, but almost themes of each chapter. That like the very first chapter, it introduces the Dursleys, and you just kind of have this embrace of normalcy, of just in every possible way they're just trying to fit into the mold. They're trying to be normal. Privet Drive literally just sounds like private, like they're trying to just be remote. And Uncle Vernon, he works in the drill industry. Literally, his job is boring. And then you get to the second chapter with there's kind of this theme of isolation, of how Harry feels in their household, but also how just this reality of how the snake feels, and just so on and so forth. But really, I just see that first book as this opening of the wizarding world of Harry Potter, of how Harry just has this sense of being in his own world, just feeling like there's nothing special about him. And then suddenly it just opens this whole world. And so most kids, including myself, we dreamed of getting our letter to Hogwarts and sort of thing of having this sense of, oh man, like it would be so cool of just feeling like this normal kid, maybe nothing special, to now, oh, there is something special about me. And I think that captivated a lot of kids, which is something that really kind of drives the narrative of this first book, of Harry kind of just experiencing this whole world for the first time and really having no idea he was famous, and then being drawn into this whole reality.
Yeah, I definitely like world building, in that first book. And I think just with Harry, he's such a relatable person. Like even rereading it as an adult, like it's very easy to relate to his feelings. And like you kind of feel where he's coming from and things like that. And so it's an interesting contrast, because it's like, oh, he's just dealing with normal human things. Like, oh, his adoptive parents essentially are really treating him pretty terribly. Like they're really quite abusive, despite the fact that he is a genuinely good kid. Like he hasn't done anything wrong. Like he's just like in very bad circumstances. And then you see like his cousin like is kind of a terrible person, but he gets rewarded for that. And so you see like that frustration in Harry, but at the same time, he still continues to be a good person. And so when he gets like to see that he's a part of this magical world, it's almost like, yes, you can be rewarded for being good and you could be amazing and magical. But at the same time, you still have to deal with like every summer he has to go back to them. He has to deal with it. Like he can't just escape completely. He's just a very relatable person to read. And also, I think when you're reading it, it transports you into that magical world, which I think a lot of the times, especially when you're growing up and even as an adult, you just want to escape from the world and like pretend you're in a magical world, because the world is hard. And sometimes you don't want to deal with things. And you're like, wouldn't it be nice if I was magical and I could just make all the dishes, all the laundry, just disappear and be perfect. So it's like this weird contrast of like you can relate to Harry and all the things he's going through emotionally, socially, and things like that. But at the same time, you can escape into his world, in this magical world, and you can escape to it. I think with the whole good versus evil, it's also a nice reminder, like, thank goodness I live in the real world where Voldemort isn't trying to kill me every single 5 seconds. And there's not like this such obvious evil that's like coming after me and invading my thoughts, invading the privacy of people I love and trying to kill me. So it's one of those contrasts between very relatable and very different from our reality.
Yeah. And kind of bringing the film aspect into that a little bit. Chris Columbus, who directed that film, doesn't get enough credit for building that from the ground up, because he literally had to take the book and bring it all to life. Him and the team that he assembled to visualize all that, to design the sets of Hogwarts, to design Gringotts and Diagon Alley, to cast. I mean, my goodness, talk about casting all those characters, what a task that was. and then to hire great people like John Williams to do the score. And I stand by that. The first 2 Harry Potter movies, the music is never as good in the rest of the films as in those first 2. It's iconic. It's amazing how good the music is in those movies. And so the world just feels so real. It feels lived in. That's why we talk about Universal, how cool it is when you go there. And even, as I was rewatching the movie, I love and adore this movie. Yeah, some of the child actors they're learning, they're getting in their groove, but
yeah, it's not really till Prisoner of Azkaban that
right.
they know what they're doing.
Right. But still, I think it's a good starting performance. I think the adults carry it for sure. Because they cast some great actors and actresses in those roles. But even if like the first Harry Potter movie is like if that was the only one, it's a fantastic story, It's a great first movie. It's a great foundation point. It's a great story to build off of, but also self-contained enough. So I love it. So anything else about Sorcerer's Stone before we go to the next one?
No, I think it set the stage really powerfully for the rest of the series.
Yeah. And I think Chamber of Secrets does what a good sequel does and just builds right off it. Let's get to Hogwarts, but let's get to Hogwarts a little differently this time. Let's see some different classes in Hogwarts. Like, I think Chamber of Secrets has the herbology, like the plants, right? So like, you get to see more of the world and you get to go deeper into it. And, Chamber of Secrets, when I was rewatching it, this really is a story about choices. There is a line in the movie about like choices, actions. I don't remember the exact line, but about how choices and actions can reveal a person, what's important to them and who they are and all that stuff. I'm totally butchering that. But yeah, the theme of choices in that movie is really interesting. But my favorite thing about Chamber of Secrets is just the mystery. It's got a really, I think it's a mystery that's way better even than the first one, but it's really compelling. And I remember the first time I'm watching it, I'm like, is this Hagrid? Is this Malfoy? Like, what's going on, with all this stuff? And I know that Chamber of Secrets, from what I could tell in the fan community, is kind of in the lower tier of Harry Potter for a lot of people, both the movie and the book. But I've always had a soft spot for that one. I find it incredible. I find Tom Riddle and how he finds Tom Riddle and the diary. And of course, the climax of Chamber of Secrets is easily one of my favorites because I love in the first 2 movies that Ron kind of gets a lot to do. And then I feel like after the second movie, he kind of doesn't for a while. I think in the third movie, we'll talk about Hermione kind of gets some important stuff to do. But, I like the Chamber of Secrets. Like, I like how he has to, how he finds out how to get in there. And then just the whole, basilisk and the whole fight and Tom Riddle. I love that. It's one of my favorite, climaxes of any of the movies. So, yeah, I really, really like Chamber of Secrets. So, I don't know. What about you guys?
I love how they build up Tom Riddle's backstory. So the actual backstory of the main villain at this point. And
I didn't know that was Voldemort when I saw the movie. So
oh yeah, that's the big twist.
Yeah. So yeah. I was blown away. That was whoa.
Yeah. There's always that J.K. Rowling twist in every single book. But yeah, that one in particular where you're just this character that's been there this whole time. It's revealed that he is the main villain. It's not just some random other character, but it truly is. It's Voldemort himself.
Well, and they really explore in that one. They really begin to explore the connection between Harry and Voldemort just by even revealing how similar they are. Like the conversation with Dumbledore with, is there something you wish to tell me? No, sir. And Harry's kind of bothered, hey. And yeah, there's a frequent theme that comes up in several of the movies and stuff about how it's not about how you're alike, it's how you're different. But I like how Chamber of Secrets really starts with that.
Yes. Yeah, it really sets the groundwork for the Horcruxes with Harry being connected to Voldemort with the reality of the diary. I just think it's such a beautiful one. But yeah, like you said, it's rated lower by a lot of people. I think the movie I would rank a little lower just because of the acting at that point. But in terms of plot, I think it's definitely up there for me.
I think Chamber of Secrets, the first time I watched it, I was terrified, for one.
It's the spiders.
No, it was the snake.
Oh, yeah. That too.
The basilisk.
Something slithering in the walls, like whispering. And that really freaked me out. And then also I remember as you're reading the book, you start to question Harry. You know, as you're reading it, you're like, is Harry doing this? Like, is he actually doing this? And it's funny because you as the reader are kind of like his classmates, and his classmates are also like, he's the one who's doing this. Like, Harry's the one who's trying to kill people. And, you know, he's the one who can talk to snakes. So surely he's dark, and it makes you think a little bit about like, who is Harry? Like, who is he as a person? And you really see kind of the trio with like Ron and Hermione, like really getting his back in that movie. And you see like their loyalty to him because they know him, and they know who he is. And they kind of ground him in that sense. And the fact that they're all needed to solve the mystery. Like, they each have a part to play in solving that mystery. And then the fact that it's Ginny, I thought that was a huge plot twist. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Ginny who's doing this. And she's like that young, like innocent kind of character where you're just like, oh my gosh, she's been corrupted, but she doesn't even know it. And so there's just so many things. And then the fact that like he has to fight a giant snake, Voldemort's memory, which seems just as powerful as Voldemort himself, while Ginny's dying and then he's dying, and you just feel hopeless. Like, there's no possible way this could happen. And then when the Phoenix comes in, I remember even when I was reading it going, okay, big deal. What's the Phoenix like? Great. You clawed his eyes out. They're still gonna die. You know, like, it was just so many mysterious things that like took a while for you to like, so many things happen at once. So yeah, the climax of that book is just really good and really incredible. And it really does solidify, I think, like Harry's character. Like, he's willing to risk his own life to save someone. Like, you see the courage in him, and you see that sort of altruistic behaviors that continue throughout the whole series. So it's a really good, I think, character development one for all three of the main characters, as well as the villain.
And let's not forget the introduction of one of the greatest Harry Potter characters of all, Dobby.
Yes.
Master has given Dobby a sock. Dobby is free. As if the climax wasn't good enough with all that going on, then the way he sets Dobby free and all that, I'm just like, come on. This is like the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. The part where Lucius kicks him down the stairs, that was totally improvised.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So of course Dobby was CGI'd, and so when they film it, he like did the motion of like kicking. And initially the director was like, oh, like, let's refilm that. Like, they thought he like tripped over his robe or something. And he went, no, I was kicking Dobby.
Oh, interesting.
and they loved it so much that then they animated that in.
Oh, that's cool. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole thing with Dobby that I think, and you get it a lot more in the books than you do in the movies, but like, there's so much tension amongst the different magical races. There's so much tension between the wizards, the elves, the centurions, the goblins. Like, it's so tense all the time, and you really only get glimpses of that in the movie. So it's very easy to miss in the movies, but like, that's like a huge theme across all the books, is the tension between these different races, you could say, of magical creatures. So that's a huge theme that I think is missed in the movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. At one point in the books, I mean, Hermione even starts a whole organization to advocate for the rights of house elves, where that's completely glossed over. Yes. Whereas, yeah, that's completely glossed over in the movies.
Yeah. It's a shame that there's a lot that they don't get to cover, because I feel like the movies have to focus on kind of the bare bones story.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so much there. I mean, I would feel awkward to see a recast, but it would be really cool if there was something like a Netflix series where each season was a book. Like they truly just made each chapter an episode, really expand upon it. You can use stuff from Pottermore, the whole deal. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. I can't see them ever doing this again. Like there's no way I think they'll ever do another Harry Potter like adaptation of these books. But
yeah, it would feel very weird to recast.
But let's keep going to the next one now. So Prisoner of Azkaban, a story about fear. It took me a bit while I was watching the movie to kind of figure out, right? There's a scene where they're in the classroom and it's kind of their fears in a mirror, right? Or the box, right?
Yeah, he comes out of the box.
Yeah, he comes out of the box.
The boggart.
Yes, which is one of my favorite scenes in that movie. Because you get to learn more about characters. They have something to overcome. Visually, it's really cool what's going on there. But yeah, I was like, oh, this is a movie about fear. And, that's where you get the Dementors that are introduced and Harry's genuinely afraid. And then you get kind of the climax there where it's all about facing these fears. And there's this looming fear of who is Sirius Black and who is he? And then, of course, that's subverted once we realize that he's actually a pretty cool dude. But yeah, a lot of people, talk about how Prisoner of Azkaban is the most cinematic of them all in terms of films. I mean, it's a gorgeous film. There's definitely change of directors to really capture, different aspects of Hogwarts. Lots of awesome directing and visual stuff going on. And I totally acknowledge that, but I will say something very unpopular right now. Prisoner of Azkaban, probably the most overrated. Uh-oh. Oh, there you are.
I turned off my video.
He turned off his video for that. Yeah, I realized
that'd be lost in the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody out there. I know people love it. I think for me, coming off of Chamber of Secrets, which has such a great mystery and buildup, and don't get me wrong, I love the time travel sequence. In this movie, I love a lot of that so much, but with how much happened in Chamber of Secrets that advanced the story, I always felt like this is kind of the one that does the least to advance the overall story. It kind of feels like a one-off. It doesn't feel super significant compared to the rest of the films, which is maybe what people like. It feels like a smaller scale story. But for me, with how epic Chamber of Secrets was, I just kind of feel like this was a step down. I'm sorry, everybody. You guys go ahead and tear me apart. What do you got, Braeden?
Yeah, I love Prisoner of Azkaban. I love the introduction of the different beasts and all the different mythical creatures. As far as the movie goes, that was the first movie I had ever seen in IMAX. So that was like a really just cool experience to get to see that. But yeah, in terms of the beasts, oh man, like I just see this ongoing theme of taking something that could be chaotic and making it beautiful, making it whole. So like you said, taking the fear of the boggart and taking the fear of the boggart, turning it into laughter, taking the depression, which was like Dementors were meant to represent,
right,
and turning that into joy of like through the Patronus charm, and really ultimately just in Harry's experience of just seeing his past of how his parents were killed and all of this, and then the brief joy of potentially being able to leave the Dursleys and go to Sirius Black, and really just his mindset at the end is just transformed in contrast to the beginning of the movie. So yeah, I think turning chaos into beauty is a huge theme for me.
Oh, I mean, I love it. Yeah, I love all that. It's just, in comparison to the rest.
Is it because Voldemort's not a main person in that book?
That is true.
He
doesn't really make an appearance in that one.
I do kind of feel like the antagonists and all that is kind of anticlimactic. I mean,
I love the plot twist.
Yeah, I like it too. I just kind of don't think I think compared to the other challenges, I'm sorry, I know. Tori, what do you got on this one?
I mean, Prisoner of Azkaban, I think I just remember reading it and the whole thing with the boggart, where it was like your greatest fear gets in front of you. And I just remember thinking, what is my greatest fear? Like, what would pop out of that? And it really, it made me wonder, like, what is my greatest fear? Because, I mean, you look at, like, you know, like, there's a lot of classic ones. Like, there was, you know, like, run spiders. You know, like, that's a very, you know, not basic fear, but, like, a normal fear that people have. And so, and, like, even in the movie, they show a lot of, like, basic fears, like snakes, clowns, things like that that people are afraid of. And then Hermione is, like, being afraid of, like, failing. Like, failure is her greatest fear. And so you kind of see Hermione a little bit differently because she's, like, exhausted that entire book because she's doing way too much and trying to take on way more than she's supposed to, and her greatest fear is failure. And so you kind of see her, like, her fear makes sense when you as she develops as a character. And I think the whole time stuff with it, the time stuff always kind of made me annoyed because I'm like, why don't they just use these all the time?
Yep.
Like, if they can change time, like, why don't they just do that all the time? Like, something screwed up, let's just change it. Something else screwed up, let's just change it. So it seems weird that the wizarding world would have this. And I think there's something in the book, and Braeden, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that I think it's in the fifth one when they go through the Ministry, they destroy all the time turners, so that doesn't exist anymore. But I remember thinking, like, even in the fourth book, not to jump ahead, but, like, why don't they just time turn and bring back Cedric and bring back all these terrible things that happen? Like, why don't they just use these all the time? Like, why does Hermione
That's actually
just so she can do more classes? This doesn't make any sense. So I always
that's
thought that
actually
was
part
weird,
of the plot of the Cursed Child.
Which I don't know if that's a justification for why it's not my favorite, but
it's part of the Cursed Child.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get off point there. But yeah, not to major spoiler, but I mean, what part of the plot is, like, there is a time turner discovered, and, like,
they screw everything up.
And yeah, like, it's a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually really like Cursed Child. Would recommend at least checking it out.
I have a theory that they're waiting till all these kid actors, you know, are a lot older, and I guarantee they will make a Harry Potter 9th movie, you know. I guarantee it. I guarantee it's coming.
The main actors are almost old enough.
I wouldn't be surprised if, did you watch the HBO Max special?
I did.
I wouldn't be surprised if when all those actors were there, they said, hey, can you all sign on for this?
But so many of them are dead now, like, actor-wise, unfortunately. Like,
yeah, unfortunately. But the ones who are alive, I think they would try to make something happen. It's too good of an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, in terms of Cursed Child, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, Snape makes an appearance. So yeah, he'd be the one, Alan Rickman would be the one person that wouldn't be able to do it. Whereas, yeah, all the main three, though, I mean, they're like 33, 34 right now. So, I mean, and they're 36 in The Cursed Child. So yeah, they're like right there.
I'm telling you. You heard it first here. All right, let's go to the Goblet of Fire next. Definitely the midpoint of this series, and it's a good turning point. I think everybody with Goblet of Fire always talks about that. That this is kind of like the last story where you kind of get, like, just kind of being at Hogwarts, and there's something lurking underneath the surface. I like the whole concept of, you know, the Triwizard Cup. And I like the fact that Harry has to face these different challenges that kind of correlate to things we've previously seen. You know, like Harry has to use his Quidditch skills with the dragon and has to learn his knowledge of beasts and stuff like that he's learned. We get to see Harry be altruistic in the underwater challenge when he saves, what's her name? Is it Flora?
Flora's little sister.
Yeah, her little sister. That's it. So we get to see in Goblet of Fire the ideas and themes and all that of the first three really starting to come in and challenge him. But then we also get to see everything drastically turn in what I think might be the greatest twist in all of them. I can't think of a better twist. And that is, of course, the turn of the final challenge of Harry, a port key, right? That's what they call it. And then Harry, of course, being, summoning Voldemort. That whole scene is nuts. It is absolutely nuts. And that's the thing in Goblet of Fire is I really think it's a story about relationships and connections. So it's about we're exploring the relationship between Harry and Voldemort. He keeps having these dreams or nightmares, whatever you want to call them. We explore the relationship between Harry and the other students at Hogwarts. We explore romantic relationships really for the first time with what's his name? Victor Crumb and Hermione and Cedric Diggory. And, we get to explore connections and bonds and friendships and relationships and better understanding how all those work. As a film, I think Goblet of Fire is the least amazing in some ways as a film. I heard that the director of Goblet of Fire didn't even read the book or didn't read the previous books or watch the previous movies. This was his only film that he made. And it's remarkable how much symmetry and connection and tie-ins there are between all 8 films, considering they're made by 4 different people. Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts on Goblet of Fire, on this turning point of the narrative?
I love Goblet of Fire. It's wonderful to me how they really open up the wizarding world beyond just Hogwarts to the other schools. At that point, you get to actually see, okay, that there's much more to this than just the UK, which I think really sets it up beautifully for the rest of the series in how, okay, now this is truly a whole wizarding war that this is opening up to with Voldemort coming back. And really, it's kind of the loss of childhood for Harry and all these people. Okay, now this isn't just some task that Harry and his friends are navigating. It is now a whole world war, essentially, that they have to navigate.
Yeah, Goblet of Fire has always been one of my favorites as well. It was interesting rereading it. I think I reread it last year, and it's interesting, as you're reading the book, it's very anxiety. There's so much anxiety in that book. He's constantly anxious about the next task. He's always worried about what's going to happen in the next one. And also that's one of the books where you see a test of friendship, because in the beginning, Ron is why didn't you put your name in? How did you do that? Harry's I didn't do it. And Ron's kind of upset with him, and kind of that little teenage drama there. And so Harry feels all alone because nobody believes him and everyone's against him. And so, except Hermione, who's, pretty loyal the whole time. And so you see kind of that testing of the friendship with them. That gets, and I think that's kind of a theme for Harry as well. He gets punished for doing good. Pretty consistently throughout all of them, he gets punished or he gets accused or something for genuinely trying to be good and trying to do the right thing. He is sometimes a troublemaker. He's sometimes a smart aleck, but in general, most of the time when he's in trouble, it's because he was trying to do the right thing. And so I think the other thing I loved with Goblet of Fire is just like you said, all the tasks, all the beasts, all the different challenges they have to face, especially knowing he's so young, he's inexperienced, he's the underdog, everyone's against him, and so you as the reader are yeah, you got this, Harry, where no one else is like that. And I think there's a really sweet moment too in Goblet of Fire, toward the last task, where it's before the last task, everyone brings their family to wish you good luck, and he doesn't have any family. And like obviously the Dursleys are the one that raised him, but they wouldn't show. And it's the Weasleys that come. And they've like fully adopted him. They're like, we are so proud of you. And like you just see them totally opening their arms and like, you know, they're there. They're like, we're supporting you no matter what. And I always thought that was just like the sweetest thing. And I always just thought like, oh, like what a beautiful example of like families opening up their hearts to other people, and welcoming them in. And I always love that scene, especially now as a mom. Like, I'm like, oh, I just so want that for my kids to feel like that love from other families. And I'm hoping that I can share that type of love with other kids. Like my own friends, you know, my kids' friends and stuff, you know. So I thought that was a very sweet moment in that book. One of my favorites.
Yeah, that was good stuff. All right, so with that, the moment I've been waiting for, we get to talk about the Order of the Phoenix, which in my opinion is the masterpiece of the Harry Potter series. I don't know about the books, but the movie, oh my gosh. When I saw this movie for the first time, I felt like Harry Potter went on another level. Like, it went from being great to being magnificent. I cannot believe how good this story in this movie is. I don't use this lightly. This is like a 5-star, pretty flawless movie. Now, I know as an adaptation of the book, it might not be amazing. I don't know. You guys will have to tell me. But I love it. So this is to me, this is the most obvious, like, one of all the movies to tell what it's about. Order of the Phoenix is really about moving from isolation and into community, into belonging, finding your place. You have the opening shot of the movie where Harry is on this playground, which is wonderful, as he's mourning his innocence. And he's looking out at these kids playing, realizing that he will never have that again. But he's also shown alone and isolated. And in that opening shot, it tells me everything I need to know about where this story is going to start and what Harry's going to need to learn to grow. So this movie really deepens the connection between Harry and Voldemort quite a lot. Now we know that Harry can see what Voldemort is doing, and we see that Voldemort can get inside his head. So it adds a new level of vulnerability that's internal, which I love. We also see who I think is, besides Voldemort, the most sinister villain in the whole Harry Potter series, Umbridge. Even at least when Voldemort's like there and he's doing terrible things, there's like this element of like, obviously we know he's bad and he's not like, people don't like him, but Umbridge is like a different level. Like Umbridge, for one, is the kind of person that can't exist in the real world. And Umbridge is somebody that keeps getting away with crap. The detention, the I will not tell lies, the way she like oversteps McGonagall and Dumbledore's like boundaries is terrifying, because you think those people are so untouchable. And the whole Ministry of Magic, like you could see that there are other powers trying in check. And you kind of see this 3-way struggle between Hogwarts, the Ministry, and Voldemort and his Death Eaters. I mean, you also get the introduction of Luna Lovegood. You get the introduction of Bellatrix. You get characters like Neville and Snape that start to get more depth to them, you know? Like, this is where we start to see that there's more to Snape than what we might see. But my favorite thing about this movie is that the other kids besides Harry finally get to do things. Like, finally we get to see Harry passing on what he's learning, this role of a teacher, of a mentor, which I know, Braeden, I'm sure you can relate with that, you know? and getting to see the new Order of the Phoenix, like rising up from the ashes of all the terrible stuff going on, and seeing them actually, like, the whole climax. This is probably my favorite climax in all the movies. Getting to see Harry and all the students working together as Voldemort infiltrates the Ministry of Magic, which I think is symbolic and has so much weight in what it's trying to say there. This idea of infiltrating from the inside, you know? And that whole fight, the whole duel with them all, and Sirius Black and Lupin and the adults joining in as well. And it's madness. It's so well done. And the fact that Harry has the realization that he has something that Voldemort doesn't, which is a family, a community. That, I think, is the biggest, like, growing point for Harry in all the movies, because this is someone who is orphaned and didn't get that. And now he's finally found that. I could talk about this movie forever, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on what you think of it.
Like you said, Order of the Phoenix introduced one of my favorite characters, Luna Lovegood. My cat is literally named Luna because of Luna Lovegood, as well as, of course, the least favorite character in Dolores Umbridge. And my brothers and I, when we were younger, we didn't necessarily like Order of the Phoenix because it's a slower build in terms of reading. We used to always say it's just 1,000 pages of Harry going through puberty. Like, it's just,
I think it's
just
the longest
emotional
too, right?
No, I think Goblet's longer.
Yes, it is. It is longer than the Bible. It is so intense. But yeah, it's very drawn out, and so there's the emotional roller coaster of Harry. But yes, I love how it truly just kind of brings to light just Dumbledore's army. Like you said, the more characters start to get to do things. It's not just Harry versus the world, but it truly is. You get to see Luna shine. You get to see Neville. You see all of these different characters really come to light that I really love. The one qualm I have with the movie scene where Dumbledore gets confronted by the Ministry of Magic. In the movie, they really downgrade it. They nerf Dumbledore so much. In the movie, just tell.
Remember that.
They make the comment of like, "Oh, Dumbledore has style," whereas in the book, he completely obliterates every single person. Like, he knocks them out.
Oh wow!
Yes, you get to see Dumbledore's power, and then same deal in the very final fight scene where then Voldemort comes, and there's the fight scene between Dumbledore and Voldemort. Same deal, much more epic in the book. So I just feel like I understand it's probably in terms of animation and stuff like that. Like, they kind of just try to keep it simple, but it could have been so epic of what they could have done with Dumbledore there.
Thinking about this movie being even more epic than it already is really cool. You know, like,
yeah. And just one little side thing on making Dumbledore epic. The chocolate frog card, it says that the duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald was almost 2 hours, and I've said to my brother and several other people, I'm like, I would love to see the final movie of Fantastic Beasts basically just be the duel. Like, the whole movie is like an hour and a half of it is just the duel, and then maybe it just has like an extra hour of like just different side things that it just jumps to, but like the whole movie is almost just the duel itself. Truly given us.
Dumbledore is like such a powerful character in the book, not just because he's like mentoring, but he's mysterious too. Like, you see that throughout the whole thing. Like, he doesn't always give you the whole story. Like, he's very much just giving Harry piece by piece, like, what he needs to know in this moment. And you see like how powerful he is in that book, like with the dueling. And then, I remember reading that scene when the Ministry comes in, and one of my favorite moments is when Umbridge is like, I am now headmistress. And the gargoyles do not let her in the office, like the headmaster's office. And I just remember thinking, that's right, you know? But it wasn't my favorite book simply because of her. I hated reading about her. And I hated that book that I was constantly having to read about this horrible person. And so it made me not like the book because of how much I didn't like that character.
That's what makes it so compelling, though, is because her as a villain ties in so well with what Harry's like, and as an antagonist to what Harry is trying to do, because Harry is trying to be this teacher leader role that is kind of outside of the books. He doesn't play by, and Umbridge is the opposite of that. And that clash, is so cool, even though agreed. She's super uncomfortable, but man, and keep in mind, this is a story where Voldemort and his army and Bellatrix and all these people are also antagonists. So the fact that you were able to bring in another antagonist in the castle like that adds to this level of like nowhere is safe. For sure. But
it really a lot of kids too, just growing up with that book, it really helps them just to think about just our own world of propaganda. Of politicians.
That's a whole other thing in Goblet of Fire and Order of Phoenix is the whole like the what's it called, the Daily Prophet. Yeah, exactly. Like you see the reality in Harry Potter, which kind of makes you just think of our own world of, okay, what are things that are being covered up by politicians, and it goes to show it's not just one person who's at the helm that, they're the evil one. If you just get rid of them, then everything's fine. But there's all these other people who have bought into this narrative that is ultimately leading to the chaos that they're seeing in the world. That it's not just Voldemort. It is people like Umbridge and the Death Eaters as well that is contributing to the darkness in the world.
Yeah, like one of my favorite scenes in both the book and the movie was when Harry yells at Umbridge in class and he's like, Voldemort is back. And she's like, detention and go to McGonagall's office or whatever. And McGonagall just has him sit down and she's like, so you said Voldemort is back? And he's like, yes. Have a biscuit, Harry. Like, it was just like the greatest moment where you're just like, that's right, McGonagall. You are my favorite person in this whole series. And that's right. It just made me so happy.
Yeah, McGonagall rocks as everything goes on. I think there's no doubt about that. I'm glad we really get to highlight all these different characters. And when we get to the Half-Blood Prince, I think this is really where Malfoy gets his good character moments, because I think up until this point, he's kind of this one-dimensional, like maybe two-dimensional bully. But here we actually get to see a real conflict that he has to have. Not just the external conflict of figuring out the vanishing cabinet, but the internal conflict of, am I on the right side and can I do this? So Half-Blood Prince, to me, is a story all about trust. Primarily, can Harry trusting Dumbledore no matter what? Despite not having all the information, despite certain hesitancies and it's also about, can Voldemort and his followers, can they trust Malfoy to do what he's going to do? Can they trust Snape to do what he's going to do? He takes that oath or whatever, and the whole climax of Half-Blood Prince is, of course, founded on when Dumbledore says to Harry, do exactly as I say, no matter what. And getting to see Dumbledore in such a fragile state as he's under this, I don't know what it is, curse or whatever it is when they're in the cave, but getting to see Harry, in that conflict. And then, of course, Dumbledore's death and getting to see like that whole moment and Snape and Harry, and I mean, yeah, it's quite a story. So I don't have too much more to say other than that. But what do you guys have on Half-Blood Prince?
It is one of the biggest plot twists when Snape kills Dumbledore. Like that is very iconic. But I think even within the title, Half-Blood, this whole thing is about the tension between kind of the pure bloods versus mudbloods. Like there's this hatred, there's this division that kind of fuels a lot of it.
Is Snape a half-blood? Well, I know he's the Half-Blood Prince, but it's weird because wouldn't Voldemort's like followers who are like obsessed with like purebloods and everything, like wouldn't they have it out for Snape because he's a half-blood?
They don't even.
I think that is something that's meant to parallel the real world. That, like Hitler, for example, people believe that he was likely had some Jewish blood in him. But Voldemort himself was half-blood. So
true.
And so is Harry, and so that's actually the mystery throughout the whole thing of like, okay, is people initially like when you're first reading the book, you think similar to the diary with Tom Riddle, you're like, oh, Voldemort's probably gonna be the Half-Blood Prince, but then it turns out to be Snape. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was something that was kind of kept secret, essentially, that they were Half-Bloods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Half-Blood Prince is probably my second favorite. I just loved that book, and I just love that book. There's so many good moments in that book, and there's so many good testing moments of Harry, where he's tested. Like the whole thing with him trying to learn from Snape, and he doesn't trust Snape, so he can't learn from him. You know, and just like, and then also you see the development. I mean, you see him, with his friends and also with Ginny. Like that's the one where they start to become of a couple, really. And so it's just a lot more, it's more grown up, you know, like it's just a lot more intense. And then you also see like this kind of obsession in Harry too. I mean, that's kind of in there. Like he has a tendency toward obsession. You see it in several of the things. Like he becomes obsessed with Malfoy. He becomes obsessed with the Half-Blood Prince book. It's like this. It's this thing in him that gets obsessed with things. And you'll see it in the Deathly Hallows. He becomes obsessed with the story of the Deathly Hallows. So you kind of see it like pushing him in bad directions. Obsession. And so it's something he realizes. And not to jump forward to Deathly Hallows, but he realizes his tendency toward obsession and how that leads him not in good places. So, but the one thing about that movie that I hated that they didn't do right was when in the end, when Dumbledore and him go back, Dumbledore says go under. In the movie, he goes underneath and he's watching everything. Well, in the book, he gets the invisibility cloak thrown on, and Dumbledore, with his final basically breath that he has while holding a wand, does the stupefy on Harry. So he's paralyzed. He can't move. He can't do anything. And Malfoy has no idea he's there. Nobody has any idea that he's there. And so Harry is paralyzed watching all this go down. And that's because in that moment that they comes back, Dumbledore made a choice. He decided that he was going to protect Harry and prevent Harry from doing something stupid and let Malfoy disarm him. And I always thought that was such a pivotal choice that Dumbledore made, that he wasn't going to protect himself. He was going to protect Harry. And they didn't do that in the movie. In the movie, they made it look like Harry's just sitting there watching everything. And I'm like, that's not Harry's character. Harry's character would have literally jumped up, defended Dumbledore, done anything possible to defend him. And it didn't show in the movie. Like, the movie was just like, oh, Harry's just watching underneath, not doing anything. And so I always hated that in the movie. Did you find that, Braeden, true? Like, when you watched it, you were like, no, what's going on?
Yeah, like they tried to kind of show that like Harry was kind of frozen with fear, like shock, but like, yeah, like you said in the books, he is literally paralyzed. Mm-hmm. Like he cannot move because of what Dumbledore has done. And so yeah, that was another discrepancy where it's always a huge bummer. And then same with the buildup of when it finally reveals that Snape's the Half-Blood Prince. It's just it's not as much of like it's kind of anticlimactic in the movie. I felt like, versus in the book, there was more of a dialogue there.
Yeah, he kind of just says it, walks away.
Yeah.
I think that is something that as we get into these later movies, they could have benefited from a bit more, is just more dialogue in scenes, you know? And I'll talk about that when I get to Deathly Hallows Part 2, especially. But yeah, we should probably transition into those because I know we're getting quite into this episode in terms of time. Deathly Hallows, you know, we could talk about Part 1 and Part 2. Man, I think Part 1 is easily the darkest film out of all of them. Like, from the beginning to the end, It is insanely dark. Even for me, who can handle a lot of dark stuff, I'm like, man, this film is kind of heavy. But man, this movie feels big. Like, it feels like every choice matters so much. And, you know, as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, man, this is kind of hard to watch, them meandering around, struggling and whatnot. And then that's when it kind of hit me in the middle of the movie. I'm like, oh, this is a movie about perseverance. This is a movie about pushing onward, even when things don't look hopeful and you're not seeing results, which is really cool of a story. Because there's lots of stories about perseverance, but I don't actually like feel like you have to persevere. But that's kind of how you feel when you watch the movie. But I really love, like, Ron and Hermione really get to come into their own and get to have some awesome moments, whether it's Ron getting to destroy the locket with the sword, Hermione just being courageous with everything going on. It's another great climax. These movies have really great climaxes, you know, with them being in the prison and Dobby bailing them out, and obviously his tragic death, which is, that's one of the deaths that I think hurts the most. But yeah, and it actually also has the only scene, like, it has actually that cool animated scene with like the tale of the three brothers and talking about introducing the Deathly Hallows. Like, I love that. Just kind of more like, I wish the movies had a little bit more of that kind of change of look to them. But I think it's a solid. I know people don't tend to like this one as much because they tend to see it as a part one and like it's slow and all that. But I like it because part two is very fast paced, and I like having a very character driven, slower story that you really challenges both the characters and the audience. So that's what I got on that one.
Yeah.
But anything?
No, I loved how long it was. I would have been down for all the movies to be like that, like just Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I think these movies need extended cuts. I really think I know there's deleted scenes out there that I looked up and seem pretty, you know, like, oh, that scene's in the book. I heard that scene. But these real movies could have extended cuts, and people would get them, you know?
Each one could have been 4 or 5 hours. Like I said, like the Lord of the Rings director's cuts.
Yeah.
And I would watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. I also remember, Tori, I remember you saying as we were watching this that you felt like this one was pretty faithful to the book.
Yeah, because in the book it's dragging. Like, it's purposefully, like, they're having conversations about how they're not getting anywhere and they're frustrated, and Ron's frustrated and Hermione's frustrated, Harry's frustrated. Everybody's frustrated that they're like not making progress and there's a war going on out there. And like everybody's life is on the line. Like, so many people are like risking literally their lives because the world's in chaos. It's literally, there is chaos all around, and Harry's frustrated that he's in a bubble, you know, and can't fix that chaos. So yeah, it's an excellent movie, I would say, of the first part of the Deathly Hallows. I mean, there's always a couple things that you wish they would have done differently, but like for the most part, I think it was a great part one.
Yes, it's super faithful and consistent with the books, which and I just think it finally just brings everything together.
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier on with the very first book, kind of this big idea was that the magic of love is much stronger than any dark magic.
Yes.
And ultimately you see this in Harry going and sacrificing himself. He is the final Horcrux that brings everything together. And so he literally dies to save his friends. And then there's this resurrection. It's this very kind of Christian imagery.
Yeah, it's the Christ story.
Very explicitly.
Did you know?
Yeah, it's the Christ story.
You'll appreciate this because I know I have lots of conversations with Christians that don't like Harry Potter because it's witchcraft.
That J.K. Rowling grew up Lutheran.
Yeah, so that's one thing I tell them is J.K. Rowling, you know, was raised Lutheran, and that's her essential worldview as she's telling these stories. Yeah, I also point out, like, okay, if you don't like Harry Potter, then throw out Lord of the Rings and Narnia too, because they also have magic.
Oh yeah,
and wizards.
They all have witchcraft in them.
But here's something you'll get a kick out of. Did you know that I listened to an interview recently with N.T. Wright, where he was asked, the biblical scholar that we know, and he was asked, like, your generation had like Narnia and Lord of the Rings. as these great epic myths that, kind of help tell the Christian story. And they asked, like, there's not really anything like that nowadays, is there? And he's kind of like, not really, but there kind of is. There's Harry Potter. He's like, that's probably what I would recommend to Christian children to read, which some people hearing this might be like, what? But that idea when you get to Deathly Hallows Part 2 of the death, that Harry faces his death, like in a very Christ-like manner, like he faces his mortality. And then we obviously know with having the Deathly Hallows, he's able to overcome death and come out the other side. And I mean, like,
he becomes master of death with all three.
Yeah. And that moment, when you think about how this series, the way you're talking about bringing it back full circle to the first one, this series opened with Hagrid carrying a baby Harry, and now we have Hagrid carrying the dead body of Harry into Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Just very ominous, of an image there. And you see, like, in the first movie, Harry confronts Voldemort in the forest and he's afraid and whatnot. And now he's facing Voldemort like a man all grown up. And so there's just a lot of, between the films, and I'm sure in the books as well, there's just a lot of like poetic, symbolism and connections and callbacks. And this really is the payoff when you get to Part 2. It's big. It moves quickly. There's so much that's great. Neville is kind of the MVP for me in that movie, besides Harry, of course. Neville just gets so many awesome moments, and getting to see how far that character came from him trying to stop Harry and Ron and Hermione in the first film to now, like, cutting off the head of Voldemort's snake, like, it's so great. There's obviously it's great payoff. The battle in Hogwarts is great. My complaint with Part 2, my only complaint, is that movie should have been way longer. Like, for how that much of a finale, like, that movie is rushed. Like, and I did look it up. There are scenes cut out, and like every time I was telling Tori, like, wait, how did Luna get back to Hogwarts? Like, wait, how did this happen? How did that? There's literally deleted scenes for all that stuff, and I think it all should have been kept in. And I think you really should have had like a 15-minute like Return of the King like style ending, because once Voldemort's defeated and they break the wand, which I think is wonderful, then we immediately go to like the future and his kids and all that, which is wonderful. But man, I was like, I want to see like what's going to happen to Hogwarts. Like, who's the new headmaster now? How does life go on? What happens with the Ministry of Magic after all this? We should have seen Fred's funeral, there's so much stuff that I'm like, man, I wish we would have had more character moments with this being the end. And you guys could tell me if the books had more of that, but I kind of like wish this movie kind of took its time, included more.
Yeah, I will say that the one big discrepancy between the book and the movie is the death of Voldemort. When he dies in the movie, he kind of like dissipates, he like fades into dust. This very kind of like mystical death. Whereas in the book, he truly does just die. It's his body on the ground. And J.K. Rowling like explicitly states it as the third person narrator, that like at the end of the day, he's just like everyone's looking at him and he's just a human.
I think that would have been way better.
Yeah, and this person who's caused so much destruction and chaos in the world, and Tori said, there's their body.
And Tori said as well, because I was talking about the final fight, and I'm like, there needs to be way more dialogue between them, like in the movie.
Yeah.
And apparently there is in the book, because I'm like, they don't really say much to each other, and I'm kind of like, that's a missed opportunity. Like, there is so much they would say to each other with everything they've been through, and they don't really get that much character conversation.
Like you said, it would have been really cool to see an extended cut of every single one of these.
But the biggest thing that surprised me about that movie is obviously what probably surprised many people, and that's Severus Snape.
Are you talking about him?
The reveal, with the tears and after his death.
Yes.
I mean, my gosh, talk about completely reframing the narrative of that character. And when you go back and rewatch everything, it changes how you see that character. It is really good storytelling. I absolutely love what they did with him.
Yes. I think it brings so much more complexity to him as a character. I don't like when people then start romanticizing him as being like, he was always just such a good dude. I'm like, no, he joined these dark wizards. Like, oh, well, he was just bullied. And no. Like, oh, he didn't have friends. It's like, no, he had his group of friends.
And they were
just obsessed with, they were obsessed with joining Voldemort. And it wasn't that he like didn't have any friends, just and that he was like this bullied and oppressed person. It was he had like a rivalry with James Potter, and there's this ongoing deal with that. And so he was a terribly abusive person, a complex person for sure. There's these reasonings behind this, but to make him out into a good person is what I don't like what some people do with that narrative.
I totally agree. And I love how, like, to go back to that idea of what you just shared earlier about the power of love, it's the power of his love for Lily that actually gives him a chance at redemption.
Yeah. And so that's the tension as well of, okay, where, because many would just kind of even point out, and I struggle with as well, like, I wouldn't even necessarily say it was love. It was almost like this obsession on his end.
True.
But I could see that theme as well. Like, that is what draws him this whole time of wanting to kind of continue to care for Harry in some way, shape, or form through it all, because he's the son of Lily Potter.
I mean, this was my favorite book just because it was the culmination. It was the final connecting of the dots that we had strung for years of, finally you understand everything. So that just made it such a special book. And it was just like when it ends and like Voldemort's dead, it's like, wait, what? And then it's like you go into like this mourning because the story is over. But at the same time, you're mourning the death of like all these people that died in order to end Voldemort. And I think that's why I don't like the idea of the cursed child, because I'm like, that throws in the face all these sacrifices that happened. And I hate the idea that he could come back, and because of like all the things that happened. That's just a side note there. But so like the Deathly Hallows, it's an excellent story. Like, it's so complex, but it's not confusing. It's complex but not confusing. There's so many little subplots that are going on at the same time, which I find so compelling. Like, in this book, you have a lot of distrust of Dumbledore, like this person that you've looked up to this whole time. And suddenly Harry doesn't even know if he trusts him anymore. And you're not even sure who to believe and who to trust. And so like you see that tension there. And then I love this scene with Aberforth, where Aberforth's like, oh, Dumbledore left you a job. Was it a good one? Nice, easy, nice job, And you see Harry in that moment, like, that's confronting his fear. Like, that Dumbledore did this to me and it's horrible, and Dumbledore wasn't as great as I thought. But Harry, he makes a choice. He's like, I'm not basing my decision off of what Dumbledore said. At this point, this is my decision, and I'm going to do this because it is the right thing to do. And I'm not doing this because Dumbledore told me to do this. I'm doing this because this is what needs to happen in order to save the world, essentially. And this is the right thing to do. And I just think that's a very beautiful way of showing that character development inside of him, to where he's not just trusting Dumbledore. He's all in, not just because of Dumbledore, but because it is the right thing, and he sees that this is the right thing to do. Yeah,
you really see his growth at that point and how he's gotten there. And you really, what were you going to say, Braeden?
I was going to say it brings so much humanity to Albus Dumbledore as a character.
Yes.
Because up until this point, he has kind of been represented as like this flawless, perfect human being who, just has everything all figured out. Whereas, there still is the reality of like, he just has this master plan, but it kind of becomes this, he's kind of a manipulative person. Like everyone kind of just seems like chess pieces in his game as he's trying to figure out how to defeat Dumbledore, or he's trying to just defeat Voldemort.
Right.
And so I think it brings humanity into how deeply flawed even this character is.
And I remember my memory's hazy on this, so I might be wrong. I thought I read something where J.K. Rowling was asked, like, what is Harry Potter essentially a story about? And I thought I remember her saying it was essentially about a story about death, a story about what can come from out of death. So like you have it, the story opens with the death of his parents, but through their love, their child is saved. And then, of course, you have at the end of the series, you have, and death is also the midpoint with the Goblet of Fire as well, with the death of Cedric. And then, of course, you've got the end where even though Harry dies, he learns to master death and to not let it have the same power that it had over his parents. And that Voldemort is trying to cheat death. You know, that's his whole thing. Is he's also trying to master death, but he's trying to master it through dark arts and terrible things, you know? So, yeah, that's story of Harry Potter, I guess.
Boom. We did it.
So, we didn't do this with our Spider-Man one because that episode just went way over on time. But we're going to get back to doing our rankings of, you know, in this case, the books and the movies. So, yeah, you could either do Braeden, Tori. You could either do, like, maybe if you've done all of them, you could do, like, just some highlights. But going from, like, your least favorite to your favorite, I think we can all agree that none of these are bad, right? Like none of these are bad at all. And they're not bad films. They're not bad books. They're not bad stories. But obviously we're going to have preferences, and that's kind of more what we're talking about here. So Braeden, what would you say? Like least favorite to favorite?
I kind of joked earlier that this is almost like asking someone to, like a parent to rank their favorite children, you know, like just give me your child tier list. You know, it's like these movies and these books each of them have such a special place in my heart that it's hard for me to give an order for them. And it all depends what we're talking about. Are we talking about nostalgic factor? Are we talking about plot of the story? Are we talking about the acting, the quality of the movie, in terms of the directors and just cinematically? But so I can't even get my best shot though, except when you asked. So in terms of both books and movies, Goblet of Fire is number one for me. Okay. I absolutely love just the flow of it, how it opens up the world to the other schools, how it really sets the stage for just the whole Wizarding War starting. And that to me is fantastic. Yeah. And then from there, for the books, Order of the Phoenix is the bottom. My brothers and I, we used to joke that Order of the Phoenix was essentially Harry Potter going through puberty for 1,000 pages. It was just more of a slow read in terms of getting to Hogwarts, in terms of getting into the flow of things. The movie, it gets started way quicker, but the book is much more slow. It's much more dense. But then from there, essentially, Deathly Hallows is number 2 for me with the books. Half-Blood Prince, number 3. Prisoner of Azkaban, number 4. Chamber of Secrets, 5. And Sorcerer's Stone, 6. And then, like I said, Order of the Phoenix, 7. And then for the movies, Goblet of Fire, top once again. Half-Blood Prince is close second. Prisoner of Azkaban, amazing. That's my third. First movie I ever saw in IMAX, just definitely what was a key experience for me. Deathly Hallows 1 for number 4, Deathly Hallows 2 for number 5, Order of the Phoenix number 6, a little lower for sure as well, even with the movies. Chamber of Secrets and Sorcerer's Stone are almost kind of tied for last for me in terms of the movies. They hold wildly nostalgic, just they're so nostalgic for me. But in terms of just the acting and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to watch, as just the actors are kind of just getting the hang of things, you know? So those are kind of more of the bottom tiers for me. So yeah, that is my Harry Potter rankings.
All right. Awesome. How about you, Tori?
Well, I don't like ranking anything personally. It doesn't go well with my personality of ranking things. So I will just say my favorite, which is the Deathly Hallows, book and movies.
I think you said Half-Blood was your second.
And Half-Blood is my second favorite. And the rest, I love them all. I have them. It depends on my mood, you know? If I feel like having a good time and just enjoying a magical world, I want to read or watch The Sorcerer's Stone. If I'm more in like, I don't know. It depends on my mood, you know? And so I feel like the Deathly Hallows, the Half-Blood Prince, and the Sorcerer's Stone are probably the ones that I hold dearest. Although I really do I love them all. So, you know, I just do.
Do you have one that like, when you know you're going to watch all of them, or even when you know you're going to read them all, one that you're just kind of like, I'm not looking forward to this one as much?
No.
Wow. Cool. Awesome. Well, again, this is from somebody who has not read the books. This is just movies. This is going to be very unpopular for based on what I've read out there for a lot of people. So please don't stone me, or please don't do a Patronus on me or anything like that.
a Patronus wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just it's just an embodiment of joy.
Oh, well, then, okay. Yeah. Don't stupefy me. Thank you. Don't stupefy me for this one.
Don't hex you.
Don't hex me. Don't. Yeah. Yeah. None of that. All right. Number 8 would be, I'm so sorry, guys, the Half-Blood Prince.
So sad.
I'm sorry. It's not bad. It's just the one I least enjoy. Number 7, I'm also sorry, everyone out there, would be The Prisoner of Azkaban. Yeah, I know. Braeden shaking his head. Oh, man. Most of these are not even like on a film level. It's more like what the story is, you know? Number 6 and 5, I literally have gone back and forth all day on. I flip-flopped them all day. This is where I've landed right now, just barely. 6, I put Goblet of Fire. And 5, I put Chamber of Secrets. But they're very close. I just can't get over how good Chamber of Secrets is when it's good. But Goblet of Fire is also really good when it's good. So they're close. But they're definitely like the middle tier Harry Potter movies for me. Number 4, it surprised me when I was rewatching the movies, but number 4 is actually Deathly Hallows Part 1, which I originally had at number 7 when I did the rankings before I started. So that one moved up a lot when I watched it. Number 3 is Sorcerer's Stone. It's the OG. It's obviously my introduction of Harry Potter, and just a great story, as I've talked about. Number 2 is Deathly Hallows Part 2. Even though I think the movie is missing some things, what it gives you, I think, is really when you understand what the Harry Potter movies and what the story is all about. And number 1, as I have already said on here, is Order of the Phoenix. So there we go. So I want to end this as we do with every Why We Love episode, just going around and talking about how does Harry Potter inspire you to live a meaningful story. Braeden, why don't you start?
I would say just, okay, so the main reality of love being kind of that is the strongest force in the world. That is something that guides me on so many levels. But something that I see so much throughout Harry Potter, and something that's always a big discussion, is kind of getting beyond dualistic thinking. I think sometimes, particularly when we talk about like the houses in Harry Potter, there's that tendency to be like, oh, all Slytherins are bad, or all Gryffindors are like this, all Hufflepuffs are like this, all Raven. So there's this reality of, categorically things are helpful, but being able to see beyond categories in some elements of, all of us have elements of a Gryffindor within us. All of us have elements of Hufflepuff within us. All of us have elements of Ravenclaw and Slytherin and so on and so forth. And so to really kind of see that reality, and not just to so easily categorize people and pinpoint people, or even have an us versus them mindset. Harry could have been in Slytherin if he chose to. There are many good people within Slytherin, and so I think seeing beyond dualistic thinking has been something that you see within Harry Potter that has inspired me and moved me.
Yeah, I love that. That reminded me of that conversation at the end of Deathly Hallows, where he has his son, and his son's like, well, what if I get Slytherin? And Harry's like, then you'll be a great Slytherin. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. What about you, Tori?
I think initially, like I said originally, Harry Potter for me is both a escape. So I tend to use it as like, oh, I just want to escape into this world where I don't have to, it's just a world, it's an escape, right? So, and I think that's a double-edged sword, because I can understand why there were so many Christians when it first came out, and even now, who are like, no, people get obsessed with it and it's too much. And I think the biggest argument I think you could make against it isn't the witchcraft, it's the obsession you see with it. I mean, people got tattoos and like they're naming their kids after that and all kinds of stuff. And I'm not trying to be judgy here, but like I see it in my own self. Like if I'm reading those books, I don't want to stop reading those books. Like, I want to be listening to it in the car. I want to be reading it when I have a second of free time. Like, it sucks you in so quickly and so easily, at least for me personally, that I do have to kind of watch myself, because suddenly your whole mind is, like, consumed with Harry Potter and, like, all the things involved with it. So I think that is, like, kind of the danger of how easily you can escape into this world and you lose sight of reality. But when you stop and you reflect on it and you're not just thinking about, oh, I love it, it's so great, you can start seeing those themes of love. And I think the biggest theme that I see that affects me is the theme of courage, and how the courage that you see, not just in Harry, but like you see it in Lupin, and you see it in Ginny, and you see it in Mrs. Weasley, and you see it in Hermione and Ron, and like all these good people. And you see the courage to stand up for what's right. You see the courage to, take on bodily harm and to put yourself in danger for the betterment of others, for just doing what's right. And I think that courage aspect is something that I need to remind myself of, because it's a lot easier just to hang out in the background and not do anything. But it takes a lot more effort to stand up for what's right when you are facing such opposition. And so I think that's a huge theme for me, and why I still enjoy Harry Potter, not just to escape, but like that is something that does inspire me, that like, no, like doing what is right is the reason for doing something right. It's not just because Dumbledore told me, because my parents told me, because some pastor told me this, that, whatever. It's because it is the right thing to do that I'm going to do something. And I need the courage to do that, and not to... I think there's a line in there where it's like Slytherins will always end up defending themselves. Like that's a key trait of Slytherin, is like you are self-preservation. That's a big part of it, which self-preservation isn't a bad thing. But that was like one of the character traits is self-preservation that I think Slughorn talks about. But you see Slughorn in the end, he knows like Voldemort is way stronger, way bigger, way like clearly he's taken over the ministry and the whole wizarding world. And you see Slughorn like, no, like I'm defying this and I am going to take a stand, even though I know I'm probably going to lose. I'm probably going to die, get tortured, whatever it is. And I think that type of courage is very admirable. And that's something I hope that I can have in my life.
I'm really glad you brought up courage, because that is like a huge overarching theme in all of these that we didn't really touch on yet. That was really good. That was from the heart. Both of you guys. So that was awesome. I won't say too much then. I guess for me, when I was a kid and I saw the first movie, I always thought about that line that Dumbledore says to Harry when he looks in the mirror and he sees his parents for the first time, where he says that it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. That's always resonated with me from a young age. it's important to dream, but we can't get lost in that. We have to face reality and live the life that we have right in front of us. And that's why, you know, when it comes to story and it comes to narrative, you know, that could seem overwhelming because we could see these problems and it can be hard to deal with these problems. And we always talk about here on this podcast that people are not their problems. And it's interesting because Harry, even though he's the chosen one, even though he's, you know, this great wizard, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a good wizard. Like, not good in terms of, well, yeah, in terms of skill, he has to learn these skills, but in terms of his character, I love that Harry is always on the edge of walking a very similar path to Voldemort and could go in that direction and is tempted to many times. Tempted to bring his parents back in the first movie. It goes with courage, what you were just sharing, that I just love getting to see Harry persevere time and time again and demonstrate that courage. And, you know, when we face problems, it's an opportunity for a character and us to grow in our identity and to define who we are through our actions. And that's why I'll end with this quote here, which is what Sirius Black says to Harry in the Order of the Phoenix towards the end before his death, where he says, "I want you to listen to me very carefully, Harry. You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to. Besides, the world," this kind of goes what you said, Braeden, the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are." And that's a challenge for all of us, you know, is, you know, will we allow problems to define us? Or will we learn to rise above and put problems in their proper place and move forward as the protagonists, the active protagonists of our own story? And that's what Harry teaches us to be. And I think that's a good place to end this. So
I do.
Braeden, Tori, thank you so much for joining me and adding to this conversation with far more than what I could give on it. And so, yeah.
Do you mind if I make one little? It's like a podcast recommendation.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
Somebody wants to go deeper into this type of stuff. Harry Potter and the Sacred Text.
Oh, yes, you've told me about this. Yes,
it is a whole podcast series. It's actually two chaplains from Harvard Divinity School, humanist chaplains, and they really kind of run with the idea of a lot of people may not be interested in traditional religion and scriptures and stuff like that, but so many people are inspired and moved by books like Harry Potter. Yeah, and so they actually take a chapter of Harry Potter each week. They've actually done the whole series already. They started many years ago. They take a chapter each week and they really kind of dive into it almost devotionally, talk about the themes, how it moves them, stuff like that. And
that's funny.
Would highly recommend it. If someone has listened this far, I would imagine they would like it. So
yeah. It doesn't surprise me that exists, because I do think Harry Potter is the great myth of our generation. You know, you had for our parents, it was Star Wars. That was the series that really built in their time. I think Harry Potter came in our generation and our time, and I think Marvel's tricky because it's kind of in the past and it's in the now and it's still going. Yeah, it's cross generation. But I think Harry Potter is uniquely of our generation and our time. Yeah. You know, I think people will look back at the 2000s, that decade, and they will say that was the decade that the Harry Potter story was told, you know, as the great, you know, film series and whatnot. So yeah, Tori?
Well, in Harry Potter, I just remember so many things in Harry Potter are literally the same as all the other myths. Like his first encounter with or challenge, as you would say in the Sorcerer's Stone, is facing a troll. I mean, that just brings me to The Hobbit. Like with Bilbo, and what's the first thing he's got to do? Like he faces trolls. So there's so many things that are pulled from, I see a lot of Lord of the Rings. I mean, if you look at Lord of the Rings, I mean, look at what the ring does to Frodo. It makes him depressed. It makes him moody. It pulls out the worst of him. And that's the exact same thing that the Horcrux does. So there's so many things that you see from other myths, that are all pulled together. So it's not like Harry Potter's new. It's the reworking of the same myth that humanity has been telling for generations. It's just a reworking of it that feels modern and it feels new to us being, because of the time period that we were born in.
That's good. And so we'll end there. Braeden, thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Joining us. And I'll be back with the other guys next month for another Why We Love. And in the meantime, everybody out there, this is your friendly narrative practitioner signing off, saying thank you so much for sticking with us in this long episode, and take care.